welcome to the William Week endorsement interview. Yeah, we're going to ask you a series of questions. Should last about 30-40 minutes. Not really structured as a debate, but you can respond to the other person if you want to. I'll probably cut you off. Yeah, so if we could just start this out, give us a few minutes, maybe give us your background, why you're running. Yeah, so want to begin?
All right, yes, hi, good afternoon. My name is Winsve Campos. I'm currently the state senator for District 18, which encompasses parts of Beaverton, Hillsborough, and Aloha. I am running for re-election. Previously served a term in the House. Currently also work my other job. I work within the school-based health services field, supporting access to healthcare services around the state for students.
Do you work for ODE or?
No, I work for the Oregon School-Based Health Alliance.
Okay. Is that a nonprofit or?
It's a nonprofit.
Okay.
Yes. I'm their strategic initiatives manager. Previously worked as a case manager for a transitional housing program that supported folks who were experiencing homelessness get into housing, and also helping folks who were at risk of losing their housing remain in their housing. It was back in 2020 when I first started running, was sworn in as a state representative in 21. I feel like I'm giving you my whole life story here. I'm running for re-election because I believe we need more perspectives like those that I bring as somebody who grew up in a low-income household, as somebody who intimately knows the struggles that so many Oregonians are facing, whether we're talking about affordable housing, access to health care, food insecurity, all things that I have seen firsthand and have had the opportunity to, in my career, help others to find solutions for. And I actually had a legislator, a colleague of mine, tell me that they appreciate that one of the things that I do as a legislator is I focus on the basic needs of Oregonians, making sure that they have access to food, a place to live, being able to have their doctor understand what they're saying when they're saying it. And so there's more work to do, and that's why I'm running to continue doing this work.
Thank you.
Likewise, grew up relatively poor as well, free lunch kid, and had a neighbor who said, "You're not too stupid, why don't you try getting into the military academies?" He was a retired sergeant, and one thing led to another, and got into West Point, and so started a career as an Army officer, spent about a decade in the Army, to include being a teacher at West Point and commanded in the first Gulf War.
Brian, just
yes, sir.
For the benefit of people watching, could you just state your name and your party affiliation? Because we know you, but they don't.
Oh, absolutely. Brian Pearson, representing the Republican Party.
Great, thanks.
And so from there, after a decade being able to, I guess the highlight was supporting Operation Provide Comfort, was the Kurdish Relief Mission while I was in the military. And then 30 years in industry. Started as a frontline manager at Applied Materials, and promoted up through the ranks to become the head of global manufacturing. And from there...
Was that California or up here?
California.
Yeah.
And then was recruited up here for FEI. They do scanning and transmission electron microscopes, and I had the privilege of being both the head of research and development and operations. So led the development of cryogenic tomography for imaging things like the AIDS virus, coronavirus, which has become more popular today. And then I was asked to be my first C-level job, was a COO of HireRight, the largest background screener in the US, screening over 11 million people a year. And from there, went to Erickson or Evergreen Aviation and helped them get out of bankruptcy. So once they were having challenges in McMinnville, I joined to help restructure them, brought in a whole bunch of government contracts and created a couple hundred jobs in Oregon.
Is a lot of their government contract work firefighting, or?
Some of it is. The majority there is it used to support Afghanistan, Central African Republic.
Okay.
So counterinsurgency operations, and I lived and flew in Central African Republic and Uganda to help the issues in that area.
So what's the through line there? Because those are very different. The high-tech tomography, very scientific, then going to backgrounding, which is probably very data focused, to then something that's pretty specialized work with vehicles that fly. So what's the through line?
So two thoughts on that. The carrier was, I left the military before 9/11. And having an opportunity to do something in Afghanistan and back in counterinsurgency was appealing, as well as I did get my wings at West Point, so I was a pilot. So that was kind of exciting, as well as there was two sides of Evergreen. They also built the aircranes, and they needed a manufacturing head, and I offered something that was kind of unique, that I had the global manufacturing capability, as well as the understanding of government and some of the activities that go with government contracting.
Okay. Now, isn't Jacuzzi also on your resume?
Oh yeah, so that's what's the advantage or disadvantage of being older. You get a long career and a long resume. Thought I was going to retire, and actually became a caregiver for my mother-in-law. She got a rather debilitating stroke, and so I stepped out of industry for several years and cared for her and through the system, and spent many trips here to Legacy to Rio, the rehabilitation center, and got to really understand much better the senior health and senior care systems. Unfortunately, as her time was coming to pass, it was kismet. I got called by a recruiter for Jacuzzi, and with the same, they were growing explosively post-COVID, so they had some manufacturing and technology challenges. And it also appealed to me when I got there. They had some engineering issues, and I have a passion for energy conservation, and effectively we're calling it green energy. And while Jacuzzi was able to author a couple patents in energy sequencing that reduces power consumption, as well as a patent that's going to come out soon, which effectively makes a spa chemical free.
So was the Jacuzzi work here or somewhere else?
It was based here because of COVID, and the headquarters was in Irvine, California, but around the world. So I spent a tremendous amount of time commuting.
So how long have you lived in Oregon?
20 years. Well, just under 20 years.
Any civic engagement, boards, commissions, coaching the league?
I wish I could. Unfortunately, when you listen to the jobs I had, I have almost 7 million air miles. So the ability to, if anything, that's the nice thing about this part and why I've decided to do this, is to be engaged in the community and hopefully bring that compendium of leading businesses, listening, coordinating, understanding, and literally serving. It would have been easy to retire, but I just looked at what the challenges were in the state, and there's many, and I thought, you know what, I've lived a life of trying to solve problems. I better not just sit home, and let's see if I can help.
Representative Campos, I know you haven't been in the legislature long, but could you pick, your biggest achievement or something you kind of want to highlight that you've done so far that's you're most proud of?
Can I cheat and say a couple of them?
Of course.
Well, so I will mention last year. I keep wanting to look at my watch, and I forgot my watch today. Last year, I was the primary chief sponsor for Senate Bill 611, which was the rent stabilization bill that made its way through the legislature. It was a bill that we introduced after the year before rents had skyrocketed to 14.6%. A number when we were hearing it was a primary issue for a number of folks that were experiencing that burden of increased rent, and so we went forth and put forth legislation that rent can no longer exceed an increase of a 10% max, even if inflation is higher than that. So that's one, that I am proud of. Worked really hard with a number of folks, a large coalition, and then I'm also really proud of some of the direct community investments that have been brought back to Senate District 18 / prior to that House District 28. That includes recently the Washington County Addiction, now I'm gonna forget the acronym, but the CAT, I've got the acronym, the Washington County Addiction Triage Treatment Center that we now have, and my colleagues and I worked hard to bring back those funds into our community. I also am really proud of the investments that we've been able to make so that Aloha Library can have a children's area. I love libraries. I spent much of my childhood in a library. My family didn't have internet access, so I did a lot of my homework there, and so I would say rent stabilization and also a lot of the direct community investments that have come home.
Okay, and I want to ask both of you, like, what, if you come back or if you're newly elected, what would be the first thing that you would want to see passed, specific policy that you would want to push for?
Okay, sure. Yeah, my number one thing is really to take a look at the side of homelessness that we need to talk about, of how do we break the chain of chronic homelessness. The programs we have, the activities we've done are outstanding, and to help the vulnerable, and we absolutely need to continue them. And the work that was just outlined by the senator is outstanding and necessary for the community. But one of the reasons I'm running is, how do we break the chain on the other side? How do we address what are the root causes of homelessness that really, how do we make sure we don't continue the need? Or if we have the need, it's less. And so for me, it's what makes housing affordable. We look at both sides. The rent control, the opportunity, the master planning, the housing densities, ensure that within the county we have access to more affordable housing. And that must continue. But what makes housing affordable is a vibrant economy that we can drive higher paying jobs, businesses, primarily small and large, to Oregon. One of the reasons that motivated me, I went to a board meeting and said, okay guys, we need to relocate a headquarters. Why don't we move it to Portland? And the board just looks at me and goes, really? Portland? Have you seen what's going on? And that's why I'm running. I want to be able to help craft the legislation that gets people to not do that sideward glance, so we can bring businesses into Oregon and whole, and use my expertise as being that business leader, holding the businesses accountable. We spent tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars on Intel and a number of these companies that are now announced layoffs. Did we put any clawbacks into that loan or into that activity? These are multi-billion-dollar corporations. I'm sitting now on this side. I know the tricks. I want to be able to help the state both attract and hold businesses accountable. That's the first part of the homelessness challenge, is the affordability. The other pieces really that make it clear, the chain of addiction. I look at homelessness 3 areas: the economically homeless, the drug-dependent homeless, and then the mental health. So being able to address those 3 areas of how do we address addiction? Stopping the flow of drugs. We, at the end of the day, get fentanyl off the street. We've all seen the ravages of what happens out there. So first and foremost, break that. Let's stop the flow. And I don't want to take too much time. And then in the mental health, we need to strike the balance between public safety and personal freedom. That there are the chronically mentally ill, we need to work with, get into the appropriate care treatment facilities to really help them, if at all possible, return to society, and if not, be in a care place because of their vulnerabilities. So that's my personal passion, is to look at the other side of homelessness, of let's try to make sure people don't become homeless.
I do want to get into like some specific policies. So just
Sure.
talk about stopping flow of drugs. Does that
Yeah.
mean more police, more cops?
And,
What is
you know,
that?
no, it can be anything. You know, at the end of the day, stopping the flow of drugs, we have a challenge with when we have an open border, which we do, and our borders are easier for drugs to come across.
I assume you're talking about the United
Southern
States.
border, yeah, southern
No.
border. Yeah, and that's the source generally is Chinese through Mexico. Can we have a more secure border to stop the flow of
But Oregon
drugs?
can't do anything about that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we run I-5 runs from California. I mean, we could stick. I mean, there are. I'm trying to get
Yeah.
practical solutions from you about like what actually.
And it includes,
We should do.
yes, absolutely, it is empowering public safety to make sure that, you know, when we have a public use of drugs, yes, we can confiscate them, go after the source. It's not the user on the street, it is the dealer, it is the distributor. My focus would be to ensure that we have the public safety enforcement at the distributor and dealer. Drugs come up through I-5, they flow in. They're flown in. Let's make sure we have enforcement to stop that flow. It's not the individual user that has been hooked by that dealer. That's not the enforcement that's going to make a difference. The flow is at the source.
And so for housing affordability, like what is one policy that the state doesn't have right now that we can reduce the cost of housing? What should we be doing right now?
So I'm taking from the perspective, what we should do right now is being able to attract companies and businesses into Oregon to get the wages available to make more housing affordable to more
But it
people.
sounds like you don't you don't want to give out money as an incentive to companies. Are you talking about giving out money as an incentive to get people to?
There's many ways to incentivize a company, and that's the expertise I bring. It's companies, what they need short term, what they need long term, and being able to ensure that they're held accountable to come here. For example, when we want to do something like high density housing and we want to create a planned community, that planned community also needs businesses around it to be able to feed itself economically. That's what I'm looking at, is how do we create economic incentive zones? How do we bring the small business in? Some very specific things for small business. I want to remove the tax. I would like to move or reduce the state tax on small business payroll up to a point, and mandate that goes to the employee, because now that employee's effective wage has gone up by 10-15%, whatever the appropriate tax rate is. Remove it. Put it in the pocket of that person, so then they have a better ability to go and rent a house, save more money. Because I strongly believe we need to put as much as we can into that person to be able to make the housing affordable.
Thank you.
That's my focus.
Representative Campos, same question to you. What is your main focus going forward if you're reelected?
Well, I will say there's a lot that Brian and I actually agree on. I think, taking a look at how we tackle issues like housing, like public safety, it's one of the reasons that I have prioritized investments in things like youth homelessness. We know that when you look at the numbers, adults that end up homeless disproportionately show that they experienced homelessness as a child. But I do have a number of specific policies that I'm really excited about. In a number of different issue areas, a couple or several within the healthcare space, a couple of which I'll mention now. One being prohibiting medical debt to impact credit reporting, and so that would apply to rental screenings, employee screenings. We know that so many folks are struggling to afford basic necessities, unable to find affordable housing, and medical debt, something that was an emergency, something that folks did not expect to have an exorbitant cost to, should not prohibit them from being able to access basic needs.
So how would that work? Because aren't credit reports national typically?
So the details we get pretty wonky, but we're basing it on a number of different places. There are other states that have done this, and so we're following models like Rhode Island has done this.
So do they tell housing providers, for instance, that you cannot consider medical debt Because they...
Yes, so medical debt wouldn't be counted, wouldn't be considered.
And how do you police that?
I mean, that's a great question. I think the way in which we police anything else, I think, one of the criticisms that's a legitimate criticism of a lot of the things that we pass is that we don't have enough funding for things like, for example, one of the things that we've heard in legislative days this week is that wage theft right now is something that like BOLI doesn't have the capacity to address all of the cases that are being reported. And so these are things that would at the end of the day likely be self-reported, and we know that there are challenges there.
Don't want to slow you down, keep going.
The other...
If I may, just not of all things, because running the background screening company, the FCRA, or Federal Credit Reporting Act, was our bread and butter. There'd be a way to, like we did with Ban the Box, that you could absolutely mandate with the credit reporting agencies that segment that would be coded as medical debt could be separated.
I see.
So it is very doable.
And then the other issue also gets a little bit wonky. If you have questions, I can get into it, but I'll give sort of the highlights of it. So essentially there are some loopholes when it comes to Medicare, specifically Medicare B, that allows so there are out-of-pocket costs for seniors, right? There's Medigap, which is available. Here I said I wasn't gonna I'm gonna just launch into flunkiness of it. So Medigap right now is something that helps with the out-of-pocket costs for seniors. It's supplemental insurance, but right now folks who have Medigap can be denied claims because of pre-existing conditions, and so legislation that will come forth if I return to the legislature. And even if I don't, I'm sure somebody will take this up because it's an important issue and seniors should have access to healthcare, affordable healthcare, and shouldn't be worried about those out-of-pocket costs when we know so many seniors are on a fixed income. Loophole. Pre-existing conditions, and then the other piece of it is that if you have a point in time that you have to pick whether or not you're going to have Medigap, and if you elect not to have Medigap in that moment in time, you don't get to come back and change your mind. There is no open enrollment period, and so the other part of the legislation would create an open enrollment period so that folks could have access to Medigap.
So this would be essentially a new funding stream that would subsidize or pay for people's Medigap costs?
Medigap already exists, right? This would just fix a couple of loopholes that currently exist.
Okay.
Cool. I actually want to have both of you ask the other candidate a question. All ears.
So I had a chance to take a look at your website. It's very pretty. I noticed that you mentioned some issues around the budget and deficit spending specifically, and I'm wondering if you could talk more on that.
Yeah, one of the things that as a taxpayer and just as a person, I look at the kicker and say, how have we designed our budgeting process that we've got an economist that sets a number, gets it right or wrong, and that generates then this adjustment to the budget. To me, it just looks like, guys, we can do a better job with that. Meaning, either we eliminate the kicker and say, you know what, we've paid taxes, we've established tax rates, it's into the system, put it into the general fund, and then the legislature can plan appropriately with what's been collected by the taxpayer.
So you'd be opening to eliminating the kicker?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. That's, to me, it's just it creates an unpredictability in our budget. Meaning, assuming say if in the legislature, you understand what it can be, and then that delta, especially the last few years, could close the gap of the QEM in education, can be able to be redeployed effectively with predictability through the nominal budgeting process, opposed to having this economist best guess, and we haven't been really close lately, why do we do that? It just doesn't make sense to me as a businessman. It doesn't make sense to me as a taxpayer.
But you're aware that the kicker is in the Constitution.
So again, Constitution's hard to change,
But it can be changed.
It can be changed. Yes.
See, Brian, you and I do agree on a lot of things. We need to look at kicker reform, but I think largely my question was around the deficit spending, because as a state, we're constitutionally required to have a balanced budget. So
I'm concerned with education because of the gap from the QEM. That's when excuse me using that word as a deficit. I'm saying we have a gap to what we need to fully fund education, and we need to close the gaps. That's my intent.
I've done hundreds of these, and I don't think I've ever heard a Republican candidate say that he would get rid of the kicker and that he favors funding to the full QEM. That's a first.
I'm a little unique. I've been told that in a number of ways throughout I listen, I try to apply logic, and I openly said to my friends and colleagues, if I vote 100% of the time with the Republican Party, don't vote for me. Yeah. I'm not doing this to be a career politician. I'm 61 years old. I'm doing it to use this life that I've been blessed with having of background screening and running construction projects to, living a life of, been around the world, to be able to go, how can I help? And when I look at it just as a human going, that's wrong. Yeah. And having the courage to say that's wrong. That's all.
Yeah, great. Would you like to ask the incoming question?
Sure. I got two. Want the easy one or the hard one?
Whichever you'd like to throw at me.
Right. So you did the website, and if anything that I am trying to demonstrate, I like to have fun, and I'm trying to build camaraderie back between the two parties. We got to talk because there is commonality. The one thing that like you read my website, I did the website question.
Look at that.
You. In a couple interviews and on your website, you say you want to pivot away from building highways and go to public transportation, car-free zones, biking, etc. I'm really concerned how that is going to impact job growth and sustainability goals because of the nature of being a motor society. Without an infrastructure, we may really be hampering that growth. So I'd like to understand how you see it and how it impacts.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Well, one, I would say, I have heard a lot from folks in Senate District 18 about the need for investment in public transportation. There are some things going on out there with regards to bus rapid transit, for example, which we're really looking forward to. And then there are also things that the Beaverton City Council, at least in some of the conversations that I've had with city councilors, have talked about in terms of having bike paths for folks to get around, places that can connect somebody from one end of the community to the other, right? We want to make sure that we're having those investments for pedestrians, for folks that are on their bikes. But at the end of the day, this isn't something that happens just overnight. Very little in government happens overnight, right? We know that these are things that take years. We know that we need more investments for bicycle lanes. I have talked with a number of folks that are fear going onto TV Highway, for example, and being on their bikes. We know that is one of the most dangerous highways in the whole state. But I think the other piece of it is that we also need to invest in making sure that folks are able to live closer to where they work. And right now we know that isn't the case. I have spoken with a number of school board members, administrators, educators who tell me about how one day a student is there and the next day the student is gone. And they don't know the full story, but what they know is that their family was struggling with affordability. Their family was struggling to stay where they were living, and we know that folks are continuing to get pushed further and further out from where they're going to school, from where they're working. And so it's a whole system of things that needs to be done to make sure that we can improve the lives of everyday Oregonians.
Joan, Nigel, either of you guys want to?
Would you mind if I expanded
Sure,
on her?
yeah,
her
yeah,
just
sure,
to-
please.
Because it's a passion. Again, transportation is just something I look at, and I offer this openly. I look at it as kind of a now, next, later. Now, what can we do to alleviate some of the challenges? How about just time the lights through our areas? Because I tried to do it not as an elected official, and was told, I'm sorry, you have to coordinate with state, county, and city to do that. As an engineer, it's one of the most efficient things we can do. It helps the CO2 gases with people idling. It helps moving. It gets them more efficient, more use and higher density through the same road, which is one of my number one values: reuse. Let's not build more. But why I asked for a little more time was the master community plan is the later. We have to have a vision and understand we're going to have some density, we're going to have these buildings, we're going to have some offices. What's going to be the flow through that area that then creates what we need from the infrastructure? And it's having that instead of maybe a shorter sight of what do we need in the next year or two, but let's look at a master plan. Let's plan back from that to accommodate these areas that we want to put in, so we then can do things like to get us to the next level. And even further later, how are we going to accommodate self-driving cars, other activities that really then create that energy efficiency and a better land use? That's what not to your point, I don't sound like a Republican because I'm a centrist that is really focused on being able to just make us a better place to live. With some conservative values, okay, take them aside, but trying to understand, hey, let's look at what we're going to do out at Cooper Mountain with the rezoning, with the air. Hey, there's some things we can do now, and there's some things we can do in the middle. I don't want to, planning for TriMet. I'll use the bully pulpit for a second. I told you how many times I go to the airport. Why didn't we put long-term parking in Beaverton? I would park there, I will get on TriMet, and I will go to the airport. I won't clog up 84. So to me, it was a partial solution.
Yeah.
That's what I want to bring to the table.
Yeah, okay, great.
You good?
Yeah.
You good? Okay, we have one more fun question.
Excellent.
Yeah, we gotta get the fun one in there. Okay, so the question is, what were you best known for in high school? And some candidates have given answers around, voted so-and-so in class. We liked one that was about, being the worst player on the, I think, junior varsity soccer team 4 years in a row.
Okay, this morning, Stolen Alchemy,
that's
Stolen Alchemy.
right.
I liked best singer, worst dressed.
Yeah, so those are just some answers that we've gotten. Senator, what were you best known for in high school?
I was very competitive. Whether it was like extracurriculars, like I had to be involved in all of the things, right? Key Club, Interact Club, Student Council, captain of the speech and debate team. I was very competitive, very involved with all of the things. I wish I had something like funny, right?
If people remembered you, what would they remember you for? What was of all those many activities, what was the one that really defined you?
Probably speech and debate. I am shy by nature. I am quiet by nature, and I will say that's because I'm a listener, which is, I think, something that folks aren't used to in a politician. I have a tendency to listen more than I talk, but speech and debate helped a bit with that. It helped with, getting up, speaking, and I was pretty funny. I went to nationals in humorous interpretation. It's actually one of my favorite things because I made it to the final round at national qualifiers, and I was the only woman in a room with 6 other men.
What's it called? Humorous interpretation?
Humorous interpretation.
So what
It's a
was
speech
that?
event, right?
Yeah, it's a speech and debate forensics, also known as forensics. I was funny. Speech and
Where'd you go
debate
to
was Bandon High School. My graduating class was 50. We had 2 stoplights when I was growing up, which is what I like to say. My dad still lives down there, and we did not have the most voted thingy because we were just a small school and we didn't do that.
Yeah. Ryan, how about you?
I think if I was maybe before my time, because if I could channel Sheldon Cooper, I had Big Bang Theory, what you see in young Sheldon, that was me. I skipped 2 grades. I was 5'5". I was smaller than everybody, but I could do everybody's homework. And so I was the little smart kid that sat in the cafeteria that the football team came by to make sure they could still play. And I was known as being the smart kid, especially when because of the grades I skipped. When we got to be a senior, the classes I was with were now all in the same high school. And so I had friends that were sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and I was just a geek. But smart, small, and I graduated like a week after I turned 17, so not too early, but still 2 years. And I went to Brandon High School, add an R, and so in the Florida area, largest high school in the country at the time.
Wow, how many kids?
1103 in the graduating class.
Wow.
4,400 in high school.
Wow.
So crazy big, easy to get lost. And again, that was me. I was and then went to West Point and grew 7.5 inches in a year and a half.
Nice.
And all of a sudden went home, met friends, and went, "Who are you?" So I regularly was asked, "Did they stretch you? What happened?"
Yeah,
And
on the rack.
yeah, well, my mom was 4'10" and my dad was 5'3". So when I hit 5'5", I already thought I was in the bonus round. So it's getting to this was like, okay, it's cool. But yeah, it was the class nerd,
Yeah.
but was in the club, was in Key and Interact, but always kind of the little kid in the back that defined himself by his academics.
Great. Well, thank you both.
Yeah,
very much.
sure.
Yeah, thank
Awesome.
you all. Very nice.